Alrighty. Well, thank you very much for the too generous introduction. I don't speak Spanish, I don't speak Mandarin, I have studied them. But I do have an interest in languages, and I hope that you get a sense of that today. I know probably everyone in the room has had experience with different languages. I do have a clip from a film I'd like to start with. So, yeah. And definitely thank you to the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. I think that's Mark in the back there. We haven't met yet, but thank you for your generosity, and we're very excited for this conference. You can just go ahead.
What's your name? Do you hear me? What's your name? What's your name? You hear me? What's your Name.
قول له اسمك قول له اسمك.
My name is Faisal. I speak English.
Okay. And you're coming from Sudan. Is it Darfur?
No. Not Darfur.
خرطوم خرطوم كابيتال. يا الله يا تعمل شنو انت عندك رخصة؟
All right. So that was a clip from Faisal Goes West. It was the last film that I made about a family moving from Sudan to the United States. Very happy to be here today. I'm talking about linguistic integrity and cross-cultural filmmaking. I'm going to sum up linguistic integrity here as sort of commitment to realistic dialogue through all the languages that appear in a film. And this includes subtitles. And although I would argue that all filmmaking is cross-cultural or multicultural, as long as it involves more than one human being, for the purpose of this talk, I'll focus on films that feature more than one language. So we're looking at sort of cross-lingual or polylingual. I'm going to start with a little story of my own that illustrates my dive into this cross-cultural sort of filmmaking. أبو نقنفذ يأكل فول. أبو نقنفذ يأكل فول. Muhammad, I just met Muhammad. He's a journalist from Khartoum. Do you know what that means? أبو نقنفذ يأكل فول. It's not Sudanese Arabic, so it's a Chadian phrase. The first thing I learned when I moved to Chad as an 11-year-old. I sat in a garden with a family friend. I just arrived the previous night, and this man was much older than me, looking at me and saying, "Abu Ngunfu yakul ful," and illustrating by eating peanuts out of a little cup. The phrase means a hedgehog eats peanuts. So a hedgehog, like a porcupine, a little spiky animal, eats peanuts. The first thing I learned in Arabic. I sat 12 years later with a good friend of mine, 12 years after all, growing up in Chad and everything, and in Jamena, drinking tea. And my friend asked me, he reflected on this moment. He's like, what point in life will you ever use a phrase like a hedgehog eats peanuts? What's the point? And it's pretty true. You probably won't come across that circumstance in life. But for me, that sentence was important because it served as an example of grammar, of some vocabulary, and pronunciation that I was actually able to use as I mimicked this Chadian dialect of Arabic as a kid and eventually wound up speaking the language. So first it was Arabic, and then I learned French as a child. And I made friends, began to make friends. I was very concerned about fitting into this new community where I was basically, my brother and I, the only foreigners or new arrivals in a small town in which we grew up. And I played football with friends for quite some time, and we eventually moved into filmmaking. There was a lot of activity around drama and theater in our town. And one of my good friends, Abakar Shen Masar, was the head of a drama team, like a theatrical troupe. He had the idea of taking a script, a stage play, and transferring it to film. And so we made our first film together. It was a 55-minute narrative about these sort of AIDS, HIV conspiracy theories, a drama, a tragedy in which someone denies the existence of AIDS and winds up dealing with it himself. We didn't have any intention to market this film. There wasn't any money in it. We didn't pour money into the film, and we actually edited it on a VCR, a magnetiscope. Just pause, record, and mixing live sound as we went. But when we showed it to the town where we lived, in the small courtyard of a cultural center, people enjoyed watching it. They loved it, not because it was an excellent film. It was very amateur. But because it was the first time people saw themselves and their neighbors and their friends in a film. And Chad, as a country, is a place that doesn't have much filmmaking to begin with. So eventually we moved on to other productions. We moved on to a film called Dabash Jaiwara, which talked about a young Chadian man seeking his fortunes in Libya, coming back empty-handed, saying, "Oh, I made all this money in Libya. I have all these things coming on the way. All these things that are coming, and winds up empty-handed. A third film that we made was called Le Pèlerin du Camp Nou. It's an odd title, sort of like the migrant or the pilgrim to the Camp Nou stadium, the FC Barcelona stadium. In Arabic, we simplified it to Captain Majid, playing on this soccer cartoon that was dubbed, a Japanese cartoon dubbed in Egyptian Arabic. In this story, a young man dreams of making a successful life in Europe as a footballer, as a soccer player. And this was our breakthrough film. We were pretty young at the time, but we got our first film festival selection at a festival called Vue d'Afrique in Montreal, in Canada, which highlights films from the African continent and the African diaspora. And when Abakar, my friend who wrote the film and co-directed it, heard about the film, he was actually in Sudan at the time, and he came back through Chad. He got on his first train. He hates traveling, got his first train, and then boarded his first airplane through Morocco all the way to Canada to present the film. This, later on, was my first experience to see films participate in festivals. I had never presented a film before to audiences. So we kind of lucked out. We got to present in London. We presented at a really cool festival in Kampala, Uganda, Rotterdam, and it sort of encouraged me to continue in the realm of filmmaking, even though I went for some time after university into political monitoring, political observation in Sudan and other countries. So in 2011, I'm living in Sudan, and I wound up writing a new film script, one that was based on a topic very important to me, that of migration, of moving between countries, the identity formation that happens as a result, seeing myself, my own family, and then friends of mine who had moved between countries, having different experiences, basically varying on how old they were when they moved. So when you move from one country to another, you begin to immerse yourself in a new culture, in a new language, and often it's as the younger you go, the less of a foreign accent some of the younger children will have. As you go older, then you still have an accent, and the parents are the ones that have the very strong accent you're always embarrassed about. So this was a topic that was very important to me. And I wrote this script for Faisal Goes West, which again deals with a family moving from Sudan with several children. Their hopes are that their children will have a better life in the United States, that they'll be able to study in American universities, get really good, high-paying jobs. And they arrive in Sudan and hit a wall. They arrive in America, and in America, everything of this American dream, economic prosperity and university studies, isn't exactly what it's been made out to be. So that was Faisal Goes West. An interesting thing with Faisal Goes West is that we had a huge collaboration behind the film. I don't know if you're familiar with Kickstarter and Indiegogo. These are crowdfunding mechanisms to bring people together with shared interests in an artistic project. And we used Kickstarter to pitch the film. Kickstarter in turn, and it was a bit of luck. I gave a pitch video in English and one in Arabic, in a dialect I grew up speaking in Chad, mixed with a little bit of Sudanese. The Arabic one went viral, and people uploaded it to YouTube, and instead of promoting the film, saying this is a video for Faisal Goes West for a new film, they just retitled it "Khawaja Bitkalam Arabi Sudani." That's basically like this white person speaks Sudanese Arabic. So it had a freak show kind of element, but it had far reach, and in turn, a lot of artists heard about this film. Many talented musicians, actors, filmmakers, and they came together to take part in it. One of these is Mosno El-Muziki. He's a Sudanese-American singer-songwriter in Baltimore, near Washington, D.C., who wrote the film's original soundtrack and a song called No Kingdom, in which he talked about his own experience moving from Sudan to the United States as a child. Another person is Rami Dawood. He was born in Egypt, but of Sudanese background. I believe he was born in Egypt. But he's now a hip-hop artist in Kansas City, in the middle of the U.S. So he also came to take part in the film, and he plays the lead role of Faisal. So he was the person you saw in the back of the taxi van with his younger brother, and then He's in the immigration scene with the officer saying that, yes, he speaks English. So we worked with a team that was bilingual, largely, but not everybody was bilingual. Some people spoke Arabic, some people spoke English, some people spoke both. The Sudanese actors, or those from Sudanese background, all spoke both languages. And so I originally had a script that was in both Arabic and English, but I wound up simplifying it just to English because I thought that leaving the lines in English for the Sudanese actors to then interpret in their own way in Arabic would be the most effective way to maintain this sort of linguistic integrity that I'm trying to get at here. So, 2014, this year, I'm sitting in a theater watching American Hustle, which I believe is out right now in Berlin. Filmed by David O. Russell, with starring Amy Adams, Bradley Cooper, Christian Bale, Jeremy Renner, and several other well-known actors. These characters, in the course of the film, and I don't want to spoil too much, they disguise a Latino colleague of theirs, I believe from New York, as an Arab sheikh, in order to sort of swindle or trick someone into thinking that this is someone coming from the Arab Gulf with a lot of money to invest in a project in New Jersey. So when Christian Bale meets this sheikh, which is basically a man from America wearing a turban to look like he's coming from, the Emirates or Saudi Arabia or something, he asks him, "You speak any Arabic?" The man says, "Salam alaikum," just like the standard greeting in Arabic, "Peace be upon you." The characters aren't too excited. They're like, "That's it?" And he says, "Well, I know a couple phrases." So throughout the course of the film, these characters are fake translating for this sheikh. And they wind up meeting a mob boss, this gangster played by Robert De Niro, who speaks to the fake sheikh in Arabic. So it's a big surprise. No one imagines that this mob boss would speak Arabic. What reason would bring him to do that? Well, he claims that he lived in the Gulf for some time doing his business, and he picked up on Arabic there. So he asked the sheikh several questions in Arabic. It's a very tense moment. The sheikh, of course, does not speak Arabic. The characters sit there in suspense, wondering if this guy's going to figure out that their fake sheikh doesn't speak the language, until a drunk party-goer falls into the table and says, "You guys are way too serious for a party," and the tension's broken. The sheikh then reveals the 3 lines that he knows. So in Arabic, he basically says, "It was great to meet you. I enjoyed doing business with you. And this deal is real." All right, so they happen to fit the scenario, and he takes off. Now, I had a problem with this. The problem is based on the fact that many elements of the Arabic that was spoken just weren't believable. That Robert De Niro, when he's speaking Arabic, I'm sure he worked on his lines quite a bit, but they sounded too literal. They weren't spoken, and he was speaking a spoken dialect of Arabic. He wasn't speaking a formal Arabic. The sheikh, likewise, when he spoke, I could tell this. Most people probably wouldn't notice, they may not even care. But his audio was dubbed over his mouth. So he's saying something and it doesn't match quite right, and they dub on, I can't remember what it was in Arabic even, Sharafa, Alima, whatever. Nice to meet you. And that was it. He gets up and leaves. So, I've seen this before. It's nothing new. There was a film called Syriana several years ago, in which a prince from an imaginary Arabian country speaks Arabic throughout the film with a British accent. And he's a prince. He's like the son of the Sultan, Sheikh, Malik, King, whatever, you name it. Does this bother most people? No. Okay. In fact, I think Hollywood may get away with a lot of interesting things. I haven't seen it yet, but I think Monuments Men is playing at Berlinale right now and will be opening here too. I believe these are one of the films where it's set in Germany and all the characters speak English, I've had a problem with this before, and I would like to argue that now, in 2014, given the tools that we have, just in terms of meeting people and networking and bringing people together for similar ideas and creative artistic collaborations, that these tools enable us to have a higher standard of linguistic integrity. That I'm sure all of you in the room here have experience with more than one language. You might be fluent in several languages. And I think that now, as we have the opportunity to get into bigger and better film projects, that we can also elevate our standards to be truer to the languages that appear in our films or whatever your type of art is. So I have a few proposals, and then I'll look forward to talking afterwards. So these ideas are specifically for filmmaking. I think that producers and casting directors have the opportunity now to hire actors who speak, or at least are able to convincingly speak the languages in their films. And they should commit to that. For directors, it's nice if a film director can take on a project with which she or he has familiarity or confidence. It's interesting, I have this script right here, from American Hustle, these lines. And whenever they mention the character speaking Arabic, the writers didn't write those lines in Arabic. They didn't go research and see, is Robert De Niro speaking in an Emirati Abu Dhabi accent right now? Or is he speaking in formal Arabic? Is this Latino sheikh going to respond in formal Arabic, which he did, which was kind of unrealistic, or back in the same dialect spoken by Robert De Niro? Instead, they write Arabic with subtitles. That's it. And the dialogue is in English. So I would argue that for the screenwriters ideally should write in languages in which they're familiar and confident, or at least work closely with someone during the writing process who is. If you're writing dialogue to be translated during production, all right, so we have dialogue in English that will be said, in Urdu, for example, then try to specify as many factors as you can about what type of Urdu you want, if you can. Do you want slang? Do you want street Urdu? Do you want formal? A certain dialect, a certain region? These markers will help the language coaches on set later on as they train the actors to speak. For post-production, I think it's important to incorporate into a film's test audiences native speakers of the language that appear in a film. There's a lot of freedom in post-production to kind of clean up things that might not have gone too well during the shooting of a film. So you can do kind of probably what happened in American Hustle, ADR, or additional dialogue recording, when you have lines that need to be just completely re-recorded for whatever technical or aesthetic reason. Also, post-production offers an opportunity to kind of review and see the feel of your film. And when you show it to audiences, you get their feedback. You can see whether or not certain specific lines and dialogue rang with the audience. And sometimes you have the freedom to cut them if they don't serve the purpose of your film. So, thank you again for listening today. I look forward to talking. I hope that by raising the bar in this cross-cultural, multilingual film production, that we can set a path for increased artistic collaboration in the future, and also just increased understanding between future generations around the world. Thank you.
I thank you very much. I have one first question. If you are speaking now on Arabic, that's a large area. In Europe, we have the problem with small linguistic areas. Mm-hmm. What is your opinion on translation? If you want to have a bigger market for a film, you have to translate it. Should it be translated with underlines or in the speaking? And can a language be translated with all its subtleties. We had in Europe the film Bienvenue chez les Ch'tis. That was not to be translated. All the translations of the film were not giving the atmosphere. So what is your proposal?
Well, I think different countries often have different expectations as to what type of translation happens for the films that show in those countries. There are some areas that prefer dubbing. That audiences, they don't really care about the original language of a film, but they would prefer to just understand it faster without having to read the subtitles, and that's fair. There's audiences that prefer subtitles, that when you have the freedom to translate by text whatever you need below, that it preserves some of the original artistic integrity of the film. I think translation is important, but there's also a question, and this is particular, I think this reminded me of an issue that's been talked about a lot, especially in smaller film markets. So especially in countries, for me, this is like Central Africa, it's like Chad, Sudan, where when you write a film, you already might have in mind potential international audiences. And it can be a challenge to balance writing a film in a very localized or not really globally known dialect, such as Chadian Arabic, right? Or choosing to write in French, because in French you'll have a larger audience that you won't have to translate for. I would vote in that case in favor of realism, but that's also an artistic choice.
Thank you. More questions? Yes. Who takes the floor? Who takes the floor? Yes.
Hi, my name is Simone. I'm from Austria. And I have a question. Since we are living in such a global world today, do you think translating films in the right way, especially if you just have some phrases there, is a way of respecting the culture too? So, yeah.
Very good point. So American Hustle is actually, I went home, I talked about it with my roommates, and someone pointed out that the extent to which the American Hustle directors went to explore the Arabic. So they had the screenplay, it said Arabic with subtitles, but the fact that they actually coached Robert De Niro in this Emirati dialect of Arabic shows a lot of effort. And they were trying as best as they could to be realistic. So I guess they should be commended, definitely, for that effort. And my friend pointed out that 10 years ago, they wouldn't have even done that. That they would have just gone to some, standard Arabic translation and had the person say, "أنا سعيد جدا بحضرتك," some, unrealistic thing.
So next, yeah.
Hello, my name is Amelia. I was just wondering, do you think there are certain, it's similar to the other question, but certain things in film that shouldn't be subtitled or translated, for example, songs, lyrics, where you're precisely prevented from understanding? Is it good to kind of show a barrier to understanding and keep some cultural integrity by not translating?
What do you think?
Well, I think I think you should. Like Babel is a very interesting film for that, which is shot and they speak Arabic, Japanese. There's a deaf girl, and there are certain moments in that film where they purposefully don't translate, such as the wedding scene in Mexico. And I generally find with music it's a place where the cultural aspect is not communicated as much, and you understand it as a song, so it's a different kind of translation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think everyone definitely should have entitled to their own opinion on that, and that's a great question, something I'm exploring myself right now. I think that it is helpful to have subtitles for a song in a film, to understand that there's a reason why the writer or the director chose, that song to be played during that part of the film. But at the same time, it's almost impossible to capture the poetry of the original song in subtitles. So.
one more last question.
Hi, I'm Brad from Texas. I live in Florida. Just curious, we have so many great international actors and actresses. You know, we've had a few of them here at this conference this week that obviously speak their native language. Why do you think Hollywood most of the time relies on just coaching the American actors as opposed to going, you know, and getting those international actors? I mean, I understand, you know, Robert De Niro, he's well known, that makes sense. But, you know, there's so many other roles where, you know, they're not well known. They could have easily replaced them with someone else who's so much.
Well, I do want to say, I think Robert De Niro did amazing for speaking Emirati Arabic. If I ever meet him, I'm going to shake his hand and congratulate him. I think the question, though, is more like when you have, you know, someone who, like this Sheikh, it's a Khan film. This is a difficult example then, but you have someone like the Syriana example, who is a prince from a region where he should speak at least something vaguely resembling a certain, you know, spoken Arabic, and he doesn't. Why didn't they go for someone who did? And I don't know. My guess at that would be that they didn't care enough to go to that extra length, that they feel the audiences would be convinced already, and that it made more sense financially, logistically, in terms of maybe trust, knowing actors instead of recruiting new ones, that they opted for the easier thing. But I think that's changing. I think it's definitely changing.
So again, we thank very much Bentley Brown for having come to the RCT, and we hope to see him again. So give him applause and.
Thank you.